Oh, it says in broadcast. Oh, you are
No,
live.
no, you're live. You're live.
Okay, okay. All right, Shy.
Welcome, everybody, to We Care Partnerships Wellness Empowerment Group and to Miss Joetta Colquitt's Wellness Empowerment Podcast. It happens every first Thursday of the month, and she's been bringing us some amazing guests and speakers to kind of help us to explore all the different ways that wellness can be something that we become more empowered to take control of. And that's what our We Care Wellness team is all about, because we believe that small business owners have the power to come together, collaborate, and create more health, wealth, and peace on this planet. We have more power to do that than any other group of people. That's my humble opinion, and I'm sticking to it. So tonight, Joetta is going to introduce a couple of fabulous ladies who are going to get all into talking about our emotions and emotional intelligence. And if you're not really familiar with those concepts, you're going to want to hang around to hear all of this, because I'll give you an example. Just recently, a young man that we know down in Florida, he told us recently that he lost 5 friends to suicide in 1 week. We have emotional challenges all over the place at this time in our society. And I love the fact that these ladies are talking a lot about how emotions affect us in business as well. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Joetta, and I'm going to back on out of here. And I can't wait to hear what y'all have to say.
Thank you, Cheyenne, and good evening, everyone. And tonight, our subject is talking about emotional intelligence. And, emotional intelligence, and we're going to be talking about it in the workplace and as it pertains to business owners. And, that's what our wellness topic is, because, emotional intelligence, that's the key to having a healthy life. It's the key to having success. It's the key to our stresses in life. That's become very important. And our first guest, who's, a topic on it, who is an expert in it, is Dr. Steph Stripling. She's one of the owners, along with her sister, of a company called Workplace Training Solutions. The company basically helps businesses identify and implement innovative and engaging training solutions that are designed to reinforce employee retention, help employees build better relationships and have recognition in the workplace. She also engages in building customized workshops. And one of those workshops that have been gaining steam across the United States and Canada is known as Building Emotional Intelligence at Work, enhancing your social, emotional, and learning skills for professional success, along with other workshops she's known for. But that's one of the ones that's been gaining a lot of steam. Dr. Steph received her doctorate in educational leadership and curriculum instruction from the University of North Carolina. And she also has 10 years of experience in teaching higher education. Welcome, Dr. Steph.
Thank you.
Our next distinguished guest, who's also has a lot of success in emotional intelligence because she's known for running a successful business enterprise, is Janet Elaine Schmidt. She's joining us from Malibu, California. I should say Dr. Steph is with us here from North Carolina, but Dr. Steph Janet is the creator and founder of Reprogram for Success for Quantum Consciousness Integration, where she serves as a business and life coach for a lot of entrepreneurs as well as for corporations. Janet is also an integrative holistic healer and performance facilitator, as well as an inspirational speaker and a master mindset coach. Janet discovered this process by using a combination of energy psychology techniques and other modalities that could change their belief system and reprogram their mindset for success in any one area of one's life that they would desire. Her clients, which include both individuals and individual entrepreneurs, I should say, as well as corporations, what she does is she goes in and she reprograms these clients for success by aligning their emotional intelligence with their mental, physical, and spiritual intelligence. And she's actually had a 95% success rate, which says a lot about what her skills. And by the way, everyone, I'm going to let you know now, she has provided us, and here it is in our chat session, she's provided everybody with a 15-minute free consultation with her. So I would say it's, definitely worth getting. And we would like to welcome Janet. So because we're dealing with this very interesting topic, emotional intelligence, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Steph, by asking you, as a professional trainer, what do you believe are the key benefits of developing emotional intelligence in the workplace?
Okay, so for me, when it comes to the workplace specifically, I believe that there are 4 major areas that emotional intelligence plays a big factor in. The ability to have more effective communication in the workplace, improved teamwork and collaboration, conflict resolution, and stress management. Those would be the top 4 priorities that I use in my workshops.
Okay, so that's communication, conflict resolution, and team management. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me ask you, Janet, how do you define emotional intelligence in the context of business owners?
It's to have your own self-awareness. That's number one. If you aren't self-aware, and I often say not easily offended. So self-aware, knowing that if you hear something, it's an opinion, that you self-regulate, that you actually think before you speak, that you take that pause, right? And that to have internal motivation. That's a really key thing. Empathy is key, to have that understanding of empathy. And I always say respect for everyone, for everyone's opinion and what goes on. And to also, I would add, to have some sort of emotional resilience tool that you can use that will always bring you back to ground you if you feel the day's getting away, that they know how to do that.
Okay. So, Dr. Steph, tell me this. How would you approach training individuals or teams on enhancing their emotional intelligence skills?
Okay, so I promote mentorship is one of the big things I try to help companies. Most of my experience is in the classroom, and so I do a lot of mentorship programs through my previous life. And then role-playing simulations, giving people a chance to actually understand that there are real life circumstances and there's a personal relevance that they can have even in a training situation. Because a lot of times when we're learning, when we're being trained, we tend to step back or distance ourselves. And so being able to put themselves into, or giving them an opportunity to put themselves into circumstances where they can feel what someone else is feeling, or maybe have a chance to think about what their initial response would be in a role-playing situation. Also, team building activities, always a catchphrase, but they are super important for building that collaboration element that is a major benefit when we're focusing on emotional intelligence in the workplace. And then also making sure that it's not a one-time thing. I feel like we can always give people the tools, but we can't just leave them there. We have to be able to provide some kind of support, whether it's monitoring or assessment or follow-up workshops. So.
Right. Good point. Let me ask you, Janet, why do you believe emotional intelligence is important for business owners?
Because we all come from a different program. It kind of goes into programming. We all come from different backgrounds. And by understanding that, and by understanding, taking the time to understand every employee. And I know that's a big task for some people, but to understand that. And you can then create the strategy to make a cohesive team. Because if you do not take that into account, that every single member that's sitting at your table comes from a different program or a different epigenetics, different way that they're raised, as we say, different values, that is key. That is very key, because then you can communicate freely with everyone there, and it gives you an understanding. If somebody went through something catastrophic, then you can have that empathy, and you know how to communicate with them and how to pull them in to the group.
Yeah. So, Dr. Steph, let me ask you a question, because I know you run into a lot of companies, you know, particularly now we have companies that you have all kinds of different, you know, as Janet just said, people with different attitudes, and you may have a lot of reluctance going on in these companies, you know, oh, I don't want to have this training, you know, what good is it going to do? You know, I'm sure you've seen, you know, attitudes and feelings like that. Can you share with us a success story on how your training on emotional intelligence has positively impacted a team or an organization?
Sure. Yeah. So I want to kind of go back. One of the questions I asked Janet before the recording started was like your origin story with mindfulness and emotional intelligence. Mine started pretty late in life. I was actually asked by someone. I was hired as a research assistant to do research in anger management, and I spent 200 hours worth of research time just digging into 120 books that were all about anger management and different strategies and ways that we can identify anger in our own lives, ways that we can reset when we get angry, strategies for making sure that we acknowledge the anger and move through it rather than just try to push it away. And I was doing the research as an assistant for someone else, and they asked me to give the workshop. So I gave a 4-hour workshop to a group. It was they're all professionals, but the organization they had in common was a church group that they were in the same group in their local church area. And what I learned, so I gave this workshop as a 4-hour workshop. I created a workbook. We went through it. There was a lot of information. I was a little bit worried, but I do have this strategy of taking baseline assessments and then checking in at the end to see what they learned. Every single person who attended the workshop was able to leave that workshop with 3 to 5 practical, practicable strategies that they could put into their lives later. And it's been 10 years since I gave that workshop, and I still have people who've either been in the workshop or who are connected to those people asking me for advice or statistics or access to the workbook. So they're still using these strategies even a decade later. So
great.
Yeah.
Janet, I'd like to ask you a similar question. Can you share an example of a situation where emotional intelligence has played a significant role in your decision making as a business owner? As a business owner,
Well, I use it every day. To be frank with you, I'm a big believer in, I don't go down pros and cons, because the minute I go there, I'm in a constricted state instead of an expansive state. And so I say to everybody, just take a pause. So every day I take a pause before I speak. You're listening to others. And I still attempt to control my thoughts. And I'm always assessing who's in front of me, taking into account what they've been through, what their background is. I mean, when I sit down and even meet with a business team or I'm meeting with an individual, it's the same process. You take into account, I'll ask them, hey, so what's your background? And I'll just listen, because part of listening is, when people talk, 7% is verbally. 93% is their body, is their voice, their inflection, everything nonverbal. And it can tell you a lot of information about what a person's feeling, what they're trying to communicate. And so I use all of these tools to assess during the day. And it doesn't stop there. Even when I go to the grocery store, I'm still using it. So throughout my whole day, it's become a practice of mine. And I believe that it's the awareness, the emotional intelligence of just being aware and present at the moment.
Absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Steph, let me ask you this. You have different companies out there. Okay. Every company has literally its own personality almost. Different industries, different, needs, objectives. How do you actually go about tailoring your training sessions to address the unique challenges and dynamics of different workplaces or industries?
So I get into trouble quite often with my sister, co-owner of Workplace Training Solutions, because when she asks me what I can do, my answer, or what I can teach, my answer is usually all the things. I can do I can teach all the things. Like I can learn anything. And so one of the things that I've done, one of the strategies that I'm using for these tailored programs is I've created a toolkit for myself. And then some of those tools I use for certain needs, and some of them I use for maybe larger companies. So I might have people especially for small businesses, I've had people do things like mindfulness exercises where they're just drawing or coloring out their experiences. So they're distancing the emotion that they're feeling through like the physical action of actually doing something tangible, and that helps them distance themselves from their emotions. I've offered emotional journals as an option. We've played emotional charades before. I've even had people create emotional self-portraits just so they can kind of start to see that they aren't what they feel. They're two different things. What they feel is something, and that they have to exist in that space, but they also have to be aware of that emotion that's happening to them. And then I also incorporate some indigenous practices having to do with active listening and engaging with empathy in specific group activities and exercises. In addition to the role-playing games. And right now I'm trying to plan out some things that are more team building, where there's a business in Charlotte where you have one hour to complete a whole bunch of challenges with your team that are between 1 and 5 minutes. So it's kind of high stress, but also super team building, and you have to figure out whose skills are best and how to connect and collaborate with one another. So I think I'm trying to build one of those into my local workshops to see how that might work out, as far as making sure that people can see that it's not just in the workplace and it's not just in their own selves, but like Janet said, it is like in every aspect of who we are and what we do. So.
Okay. Well, Janet, I'm going to ask you this. Let's say you have a client. Okay. This could be an individual client. It could be a corporation, and you're working with them. And share with us a tool that you may use, which is what you're known and have become famous for, that demonstrates how you guide this client for their emotional intelligence to become successful, which is what you're pretty famous for. Give us an example of how you work with them. Let's say it could be a team. A company calls you in and say, I have a team. They're lacking motivation. They're lacking emotional intelligence. They're not being productive. Okay. Our productivity rate declined by 25% last year and 50% the prior year.
I haven't had a client like that yet, but I'll take that on.
Our profits decreased by 40%. The manager tells you my job is going to be gone, if I don't do something. Or you had an entrepreneur that says, I'm just not being productive here. My business is just flat. I've been at it for 3 years. I believe in it. I mean, what would you do? What process?
I'll give 2 examples. So let's take the team. So the first thing I do with the team is I take them through a mini workshop. And I take them through a workshop that takes them through to think about being a student of their life. So each individual there, even though we're doing it as a group, they're being the student of their life. And to know that they're the scientist and everything's possible. So I have them examine different areas of their life that's repeating, anything that's repeating or what's working, what's not working. And I ask them to be very honest. And so we go through that, and through the sharing, then I have them share, and through the sharing, they find out, oh, wait, we all come from different backgrounds. That's the aha moment for them. But then I also take them through different ways that they can bring themselves sound into awareness or into what I call emotional resilience tools. You see, the samurais had a really great tool that they used. And this is one thing I teach every group. And what they did is, prior to going into battle, they knew that they'd have all these thoughts and emotions going through their head. So they'd be top heavy or out of balance. And that's what happens with a lot of these teams, is they're way overthinking. They're in their head the whole time. And so they can't be grounded. So I take them through a 90-second reset that the samurais used to use prior to going into battle, seriously, where they take all their thoughts and emotions, flush them down their body, down to the ground, to the center of the earth, and then they can be present. They can be aware. So that's one of the first things I take them all through is I start off with either that or being aware of the awareness, where they have to be aware of everything in the room, even their breath. And then we go down into that. Then we start talking about the goals that the team has. What is it that you wish to achieve? And so they all work together on what that goal is. And depending, they have to phrase it a certain way. And then I can test each individual's subconscious mind to see if they believe it or they don't. And that's something I do in private, because I don't disclose who's on the goal or who's not, because when I'm done, everybody's on the goal. Everybody's in the whole brain state on the goal. So to me, it's not who tests weak, who tests strong. It's that when I leave, everybody, the goals that they've put into place, like we are the most productive team here, or whatever the whole team comes up with, we will make sure that they're in the whole brain state. The subconscious and conscious mind are in agreement, every single team member there, without changing their epigenetics. It will just be only on the task at hand that they want to achieve. And it works really well. I've also worked with, I recently had a CEO who, right when COVID started, they were watching everything that was happening with COVID, and they had convinced themselves that they had all these diseases, like even mold. And so they were going to doctor to doctor to doctor, and therapist to therapist to therapist, taking supplements. And somebody had suggested they come to see me. And so we unraveled where that belief first came from, because that's what you do. You go down the rabbit hole to where the belief, it's kind of sitting into the feeling, like Dr. Steph said. You go into that feeling, you find out where it first started, you clear it out. So if it's fear, you could put safety, security, and confidence in its place, right? All the way through. And then once you've done that, you can go into what I call psyche, or you go into the whole brain state, and you clamp the left cortex with the right cortex and bring it into a whole brain state. But you need to find out what the trauma is that caused it. And I usually clear out the traumas before we set in the new belief system. But I did that. I worked with her for 8 sessions. And after she was done, she was like, that was amazing. I feel great. She went on her way. She contacted me a year later, said, I'm starting another job. I have a little bit of anxiety. Can we just do a tweak? And I said, yeah, we'll just do a tweak. And so it's kind of the process of reprogramming. It's finding where that kink is, where it first starts. And most of the time it's in your childhood.
True.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that.
Usually it's always in your childhood.
Yep.
And that's not I want to say this. It's a disclaimer. It's not our parents' fault, because our parents didn't understand that they were programmed as well. But because we're moving into what I believe is a new era where we can actually look openly at these things with no judgment, just discernment, and deciding to change them so that we can live the best lives that we deserve and we desire.
Right, right. So, Dr. Steph, can you give me some examples in your work where you found that, emotional intelligence training, some of your customized programs, has actually resulted in improving, conflict resolutions or employee engagement within the organizations, for example, that you've worked with, and how that has worked?
Well, I mean, like I said, most of my experience with social emotional learning, emotional intelligence has to do with the classroom space. And so I'm transitioning into the workplace training, the corporate world, pretty new to that. But I can give you an example of just some really simple practice that I use. I'm trained in contemplative pedagogy, which is mindfulness in the classroom, but since mindfulness has a negative political connotation, contemplative pedagogy is the PC term. And one of the little tricks that the very first time I learned it, the great thing about learning these kinds of skills and strategies that are associated with emotional intelligence is that they're practicable immediately. They're not things that you have to learn theoretically and then figure out how it works and then put it into practice. There are things that can be instantly implemented. And so the very first training I got, I was able to go back into the classroom, and I had a classroom. It was at Clemson University, and the students were clearly struggling with emotional regulation and with transitioning from life outside of my 18th century literature classroom into 18th century literature. So there was a bit of a struggle there for the first few weeks. I got this training at a conference, immediately went back and invited the students to participate in a 1-minute mindfulness body scan. And I invited them. So with emotional intelligence, it's not something that can be forced. It's not something that people can be tricked into. They have got to get to a place where they're willing to give it a try. And so I offered students who didn't want to participate, they could not show up for a minute, and if they wanted to participate, to come in on time. 5 students did not participate when we first started, but instant transformation. 1 minute, 60 seconds. I didn't do anything fancy. I pulled up an app that was similar to Calm. That wasn't Calm, but it was before that. 1 minute body scan. We sat there in quiet. That was the single most impactful thing that they knew all kinds of things about 18th century British literature, but in the evaluations, it was that mindfulness moment that made the most impact in their learning experience. So I'm hoping that is going to translate into corporate training. That kind of like just convincing them that it's worth a shot and there's no judgment. Let's just figure out where we are and reset for a second, like Janet mentioned with is it a 90-second?
It's a 90-second. I always call it a 90-second emotional resilience reset. Okay. And it's exactly, I was nodding the whole time you're saying that, because it was exactly what you're talking about. It's like taking people being aware of the awareness, be aware of the chair you're in, be aware of the room you're in. It's all of that, and it just takes you down to just where you're just there.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful.
It really is. Yeah. And it was like in the classroom space, in that was the first time. It's not the only time. That was the very first time that I did it. And in the classroom space, it was, I could either lose 20 minutes of productivity in my 55-minute class because they couldn't figure out how to focus, or I could take a minute that, by the end of the semester had evolved into 5 minutes. We had 5-minute mindfulness at the beginning of each class, and then 150% increase in productivity as a result. And they felt good about themselves, and they felt confident, and like the level of frustration reduced from just one simple task that helped them figure out where they were emotionally.
Agreed.
So in addition, Janet, to let's say your 90-second,
yes,
calming down, What's another tool that you would, let's say, use if one was trying to approach or dealing with conflict resolution and having difficult conversations, let's say with their employees or business partners, and trying to apply emotional intelligence? Because that's one we deal with every day in the workplace, whether just as business owners. It seems like, I always say to myself, why can't everybody just think like me? I think I'm logical. I think I'm rational. I think I'm reasonable. But one of the things I've had to come to realize myself is that not everybody thinks like me.
No. One of the tools that I do give, and it's part of NLP, and one of the tools I give is for people to visualize. So if you have a difficult conversation that's coming, aside from doing the samurai, which would clear everything out and leave you open to literally step forward, the other tool that I do give people is kind of the motion picture swish method, which is you can visualize the situation the way it is. Take the time out. Don't have the conversation right away. And I would say if you can do this by taking time out, if you can't, go do the samurai, which is 90 seconds. But if you can take time, go in your office, sit in your car, whatever it is, and sit and visualize the way you actually see the situation. Because sometimes the way we see the situation is not the way the situation really is, because we let our emotions go there. When we let our thoughts go there, then we go into emotions, then we go into beliefs. That's how it goes. It goes in that order. And once you hit beliefs and you really get it in your conscious mind, then it becomes really concrete. So you don't want to go that route. So you want to sit in the thought and take yourself into the emotion. Now I have them sit so they see themselves, see a picture screen in front of them, and they're sitting in a chair. And they're watching this whole scene of how they think it is play out. They hear the sounds, they see the clothing, they see the colors, they see everything that's going on, they hear the voices. Then there's another version of them standing behind them, and they're watching this too. And they're taking it in, the sounds, and they play it again. They play all this, and they're listening to it, sitting in the chair and standing up. And then I say, behind you in the distance is the picture of the way you want it to turn out, the way you would love for it to turn out. And now switch the screens. And so that screen that you don't want is way behind you. And the screen that you picture it is like right in front of you. And now you're playing how you want to hear it, the sights, the smells, you're seeing it, you're feeling it. And the you sitting is seeing it and feeling it. And the you standing is seeing it and feeling it. And the other is way in the back. Now, when they come back in, when they pull, I'm going through this quite fast, but when they bring themselves back in, they will find 99.9% of the time that what they ever thought was happening never happens. In matter of fact, it happens very close to the way they visualized it. And it is a way, and part of this is by changing your perspective, your energies, your thoughts, because at the end of the day, and I got to say this, at the end of the day, the biochemical effects of your brain functioning shows that your cells are affected by your thoughts, which means your thoughts have energy.
Yep.
And they will pull, I think it was Einstein who said, put the energy out there of the reality you wish for, and you can't help but bring it to you. That's not philosophy, that's physics. So this all is combined together. It's very hard to separate it because our emotions have energy. And so once you can get past that, now you got real emotional intelligence.
Well, that brings me to this thought where I know, Dr. Steph, in a lot of your programs and customized solutions, you've been doing a lot of diversity and inclusion training.
Yes.
And trying to incorporate that with emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Now, that's a heavy subject for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
Particularly with all of the political issues and topics that we have at play now, and everything that's going in force with it. And I would just think that, trying to how do you incorporate that, first of all? I guess that's my question, first of all, in a customized training program dealing with emotional intelligence, because a lot of people are very good people no matter what their politics are, but when it comes to emotional intelligence, which means maintaining their cool, people can get a little let's just say hyperactive on those thoughts and emotions. So how do you do that so that everyone can see past all of that?
I have two things that have been working quite successfully that aren't necessarily because I do tailor them. They're not exact, prepackaged conversations. So after I've done an assessment, first of all, I want to kind of audit and get to know the company before I create my workshops or my training programs, training solutions. And after that, one thing I do is I prioritize creating a space that is safe for everyone. We can't deal with our emotions. We can't deal with difficult dialogue. We can't reflect on anything internal that might cause fear or challenges or frustrations for other people if we don't feel like we're in a place that is going to be judgment free. I mean, that's going to have judgment, right? If we're going to feel like we're judged, if we feel like we're going to be attacked for saying what we believe or what we think, then that is putting a hard and fast block on any emotional work that we might need to do moving forward. And so creating that space, creating a consensus with the group among every participant, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is allowed, what is not allowed. And with the DEI elements, one of my biggest, most successful kind of conversations that I have with people in this experience is inviting them to recognize it's a perspective exercise, right? So helping them realize that different cultures, different races, different experiences, different epigenetics.
Yes.
Very good. They contribute to a greater overall capacity for the company as a whole. More perspectives, more experiences, more life histories, more cultures, more races, more genders, and learning how to accept all of those things. In the space of learning how to accept all of those things, there has to be a place where we have some kind of value forwarded exposure. Why am I even going to be willing to think about things that are political and engage in difficult dialogues? The end result is going to be it's going to be a much more dynamic, creative, productive. The relationships among the people in your company and your organization are going to be more authentic. People are going to feel safer in the workspace if they figured out how to feel safe in the workshop. And so those are the two things: creating a safe space, and then reminding them of the value that considering other perspectives statistically, definitively,
yes,
creates positive change in the workplace and in the company culture. And so my job is to help them find that, but those are the beginning and the end that I start with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certainly a believer that the more diverse something is, the better the product will be.
Correct.
Because the more you have different perspectives, the better it will be. So I guess my question to you, Janet, is that you have a business owner, okay,
Mm-hmm.
a CEO of a company,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants the best for his company,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe he's not going in the direction that he needs to go because he's not being diverse and inclusive, and he doesn't really know how.
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you as his business coach or advisor, or you're dealing with the company. And maybe that's one of the reasons their profits and productivity has been down, because they're not being as diverse and
Right.
inclusive as they should be. And it's not so much that I'm not going to say they're racist. Okay. I'm just going to say people don't know how. They're doing things based on their experience.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
People only know as much about their experiences they've had exposure to.
Yeah.
So how do you work? What's a tool or strategy that you would use to implement and work with the company or CEO to help guide them to, feel comfortable with diversity and inclusion? Because it's about being comfortable. Some people may have had closed minds because of their experiences, but they need to learn to feel comfortable and appreciate what diversity and inclusion, how it can benefit them, not only personally, but financially as well.
Financially, yes. Well, I literally do take them through the whole part about epigenetics so that they can understand that, look, we are all programmed. We've all been programmed for how long? I mean, for our television shows program us. Everything's programming out there. And so you have to understand that. And so when I take them down that and they actually realize that part of this is their program. It is their program that they have. So you kind of have to undo the program and start talking to them. It's like on a one-on-one basis and talk to them. I've never had, I have to be honest with you. I've worked with companies pretty much the last company I worked with was in India. So I've never really run across this, but I would take them aside and say, and take them actually through my workshop and let them see how even the people around them that they're friends with, that is the best way to do it, is to take them around and see how all your friends are programmed. And if you're in the same group of friends, pretty much you came from the same programming or parts of the same programming, and to let them see that. But other parts of this world aren't programmed that way. And I would actually then go and show them other companies that are very successful, that have diversified and expanded that way by accepting everyone's epigenetics, everything that everybody's gone through, and embraced what everybody's gone through. And one of the ways that you could even do that is with their team that they have now, because I guarantee you, if that's the way the CEO is thinking, he doesn't know his team. He doesn't know what they've gone through. He doesn't know what their background is. He doesn't know that maybe one of them grew up in poverty. I mean, most people look at me and they think that I grew up in poverty, and they don't think that. So we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to unravel and actually become aware of what's going on with those around us, we can understand it. So that would be the first step that I would take him through, so that he could understand his own team. And then from there, start taking the steps to diversify and teaching him what that means for everyone on his team and how enhancing that can be, because that's really how we should be living in this world. And so I would take them down that. But like I said, I haven't run across that yet. But thank you for that question, because that really got me thinking, how would I do that? I would do it by, exposing him to his own team, exposing him to everything around him, and then asking him questions. And this is the other thing that I challenge anybody. If you have a really strong belief, which that CEO would have, if you have a strong belief, I'd say to you, where did that come from? Do you really own that belief? And I take you down that rabbit hole to figure out where it came. Now, maybe you do, but most likely the majority, probably 80% of the beliefs we have came from somewhere else. They did not come from us. Now we can adopt them and we can say, yes, that is me. But we can also say, my fear came from my mom, and I discarded that pretty fast. So you can figure out, and quite frankly, we all have different political beliefs, different everything. And that doesn't make us who we are. And I think when people start dissecting that, it doesn't really matter about those beliefs. And to me, when you're running a business, you want to make sure that that's on the lowest totem pole, that it doesn't matter. That really what we matter is how we're going to work together and how we're going to listen and how we complement each other. And how we can actually, one of the bigger things is how we can praise each other. For a great job. I find that a lot of people have a hard time telling other people that are in the same position that they did a fantastic job because they're so fear-based that that person will get the praise, instead of saying, hey, great job. Great job. That when somebody does that and they're on the same level as somebody else, or somebody gets promoted and they say, great job, I think you have great emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to the question I was going to pose to Dr. Steph, in fact, is that, I was going to ask her, what are some common barriers or challenges that individuals or organizations may face, when they're trying to improve their emotional intelligence in the workplace, and how, you might approach improving them. But one of them is like, just even trying to tell somebody great job.
Yeah.
People are scared to do that because they're so busy competing with each other.
Yes.
But part of it, I think, I've always thought, rather than creating an environment of competition, we should be trying to focus on more of an environment of teamwork and togetherness. But that's really hard to do in a lot of businesses because of how society has ingrained us and sort of brainwashed us that, you're supposed to make things competitive.
Correct.
In the work environment. But getting back to that, I mean, Dr. Steph, what are some of the common barriers or challenges that you see?
Skepticism is probably the biggest. The lack of awareness, like Janet was mentioning, the lack of role models that they have, especially company owners. There's not anybody who's going to be showing them how to do it unless they do the work themselves. A lot of times people, especially in the education world, people are, I don't have time. My workload is too heavy. That's just one more thing for me to do. When I got officially trained in social emotional learning, I was in a middle grades classroom and loved every minute of it and ate it up. And all of my peers were bitter and angry because we were in the middle of a pandemic and there were too many things, too many fires to put out. And when I fully engaged with social emotional learning, then the time constraints didn't matter anymore. The workload didn't matter anymore. That the weight of those things resolved themselves, but we don't know that, and that's just a barrier that we've got to overcome as trainers in this area. And then a lack of support. So sometimes it might be maybe people who are the workers in the company who want to create this kind of culture, but the leadership isn't supporting that or isn't creating an environment where it is safe or encouraged to do that. So those would be the major barrier, the top few barriers that I can say off the top of my head. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like all of those things are pretty tied together. They all have to do with a lack of knowing, a lack of understanding, and a general lack of opportunity to even have that conversation with themselves. And hopefully that's what my training will do.
Well, how would people get a hold of you, Dr. Steph?
My website is WTS.
Wait, let's put it in here.
Let's do it. It's the company name, WTS, and then workplacetrainingsolutions.com.
WTS, just WTS, and then put out workplace
training solutions.
Workplace training solutions.com. I'm just gonna, but it would still be www.WTS.
It doesn't matter. The internet has evolved.
Yeah, it'll go anyway.
Okay. And I just put that in the chat.
Great, thank you.
So everyone can see that. And in terms of, I hope everyone can see where we put Janet's free. I'm just going to put it up there. Yeah, where Janet's free 15-minute interview with her. If not, you can also go into the Facebook area and sign up if you have access to that. I will also put it on my Waldron Travel curating and my personal website for those of you who'd like to have it. So we'll try that. Oops. Okay, so let me take this out of here. I don't think I should have put it in there, but in any event, so we put it there. Okay, now I can hide it. I've taken it out of there. Now, Janet, I'm going to ask you the $50 million question that probably everyone has been waiting for, to just give a brief synopsis, because we will have to have you back on another session to have to talk about this. But let's talk about your training and the process of what you do to actually reprogram someone's mind to basically achieve, so that they can have emotional intelligence to have a more wonderful and better life. Although you do this primarily as a business coach with, entrepreneurs and, companies, but let's just talk about it. If somebody wanted to come to you for a business coach or even a life coach, just tell somebody overall what your program is about. Well, and it's not new age California stuff. This is real, the real stuff, everybody.
No, it's a mixture between what I call science and energy psychology methods. And so, as I said before, I discovered what really worked together through my own life. This was not planned. This was well over 10 years ago, and this was not planned. But as I went through the rabbit hole in my own life, I was like, I got to be able to change my subconscious mind. I have to be able to change, because my family had certain views of money. So it was connected to my inherited money consciousness. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs have a ceiling instead of lifting the ceiling. This is a common thing that I have with all my entrepreneurs, is lifting the ceiling, because they limit themselves. And this is programmed in us. But that's where I went down the rabbit hole. And then I kept going and going. And so I would learn NLP and hypnosis and be board certified in these things. And then I thought, well, I'm going to get meditators, so I have to do theta healing. So I just kept going to DNA reengineering and then Psyche. And so anything that I thought could change the subconscious and bring our left cortex and our right cortex into a whole brain state, because that's the way you do it. The subconscious and conscious mind, because the subconscious is the one thing we want to get control over. And so when I went through that, that's how I found out all these techniques worked when I worked on myself and got all certified. And then all of a sudden I started getting clients, and I started getting actually parents, because they realized that we're programmed really from the time we're born to about 7 years old. We're in theta state. So we soak up everything our parents say, what they believe, what society says to us. I mean, that's why when your child goes to kindergarten and comes back and says somebody's the boss, I had one of my kids come home and say, you know what? You know who's the boss? And I'm thinking they're going to say me, or they're going to say their dad. And what they say? They said, God's the boss. I thought, whoa. And she went to a nursery school. I think she was 4 years old. She goes, everybody was saying they were the boss at school. And I told them there was one boss, and I thought they were going to say me. And, she says God. So I thought, oh, something's working there. I did something right. But I'm just saying that when people start looking at that, then they can see how they're programmed. And so all I have to do is listen to somebody start talking, and I can understand exactly what the problem is and where we're headed. And so with them, I work with them. We go down where it first started. So I'm talking about sitting in our feelings and finding out where it started, but I can take them down a timeline, which is what NLP uses. And so does theta healing. And we go where it first started. and I remove, delete, reorganize, take it out, and I put in a new belief. So if it's fear, I put safety, security, and confidence in its place, bring it all the way through, and then I'll double clamp it down with a new belief system that they work with me on that brings their left cortex and their right cortex in the whole brain state. Now, depending on if they've had trauma, I'll use EMDR. EMDR is a great tool to get rid of trauma. So I'll get rid of the trauma first.
And what does EMDR stand for?
Well, it's really eye movement. It's like an eye movement integration. And so it's EMDR or EMI, both are the same, and they're eye movement integration. And what that does is the way we hold trauma in our minds is fragmented. So that's why it's hard to heal, because your left cortex is saying, the logical side saying, no, I can heal it over here. And the right side, your creative's like, no, I can heal it over here. And so what something like EMDR or EMI does is it brings once again, the left cortex and the right cortex together in a whole brain state. And now they're in agreement on how to heal. And they call it the silent healer. And I'm kind of going through it fast because I don't want to get into the scientific part of it, but this is a quick overview of how that works. And so usually if somebody comes with me and they have a lot of trauma, I will clear it out with that first, and then we'll go down the timeline and see where everything works out. But I use about 7 or 8 different techniques, and it always depends on who's in front of me, whether somebody's a meditator or whether somebody's more of a linear type person. It's going to determine which way we'll be able to reach their subconscious and change it. But it does work. And I'm happy that I feel honored that I ended up figuring it all out. And I never thought I'd have a totally different career at this point in my life. And so I feel blessed.
Well, we are blessed that you have shared and spent this hour with We Care Wellness. We would like to invite you back with us again in the future. Dr. Steph, we have been so honored to have you as well. We've learned so much from both of you because, We Care Wellness is about wellness, and we look at all aspects of wellness. We look at emotional, behavioral, financial, physical, mental, because all of those aspects really cover one's wellness. And every month on the first Thursday of each month, we cover a different topic of wellness. And this month it was emotional intelligence. And as we said in the beginning, emotional intelligence deals with our health. It deals with having better relationships. It deals with success. It deals with our overall well-being. It deals with everyone. And it's certainly a part of our emotional wellness, mental wellness, all aspects of wellness. And we're so delighted that Dr. Steph and Janet Elaine Schmidt have joined us and helped us. And we thank everyone, and we invite you back next month as we cover another topic. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. And don't forget to pick up the website for Dr. Steph, Workplace Training Solutions, and get your 15-minute free consultation with Janet Elaine Schmidt. Have a good one, you guys.
Bye.